Sometimes all you need is a good book and a cup of tea. Sometimes all you need is a good book and a cup of tea. If you are a subscriber to my channel, then you probably saw that last Saturday, August 1st, Lammas, the pagan holiday, I finally, after like 2 years of working on it, released my secret project, which is the Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch. And that is this book right here, this ultra teeny tiny book. It's a novelette, shorter than a novel or even a novella, but longer than your typical short story. It's about 10,000 words. And it is the first in what is going to be a collection called The Tales of the Sun and the Moon. And again, if you're a subscriber, you probably know that my high fantasy series, my epic fantasy series, is called The Sun and Moon Saga. So as you can imagine, The Tales of the Sun and the Moon, it is a collection of shorter pieces, short stories, novelettes, novellas, that are all set in New Camelot, which is the setting for the Sun and Moon Saga. So yes, on August 1st, I released the first installment in the Tales of the Sun and the Moon, and there will be another installment coming later this year, and I hope to grow this collection of work as much as I can, honestly. I have so many ideas for short stories, be they folklore from New Camelot, so fiction within fiction, or be they backstories for some of the characters that you will meet in the main series. And if you've read Aurora and Luna, then you have met some of the characters, basically all of the characters, except for one, at least that I can think of, in The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch. But you don't have to read Aurora and Luna or the Sun and Moon Saga to jump into the Tales of the Sun and the Moon. At least at this point in time, all of the tales in the Tales of the Sun and the Moon, and I have a lot of them that are on the go, so yeah, expect more of these stories in the future. All of them have been written so that if you've never read the Sun and Moon Saga, you can just jump in and get a feel for what New Camelot is all about. So another cool thing about the Tales of the Sun and the Moon is that I'm releasing these stories through a variety of formats. I am releasing them as books, picture books specifically. So The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch, this was me taking that step into not just like wanting to be an illustrator and drawing my world in my spare time, but like actually becoming not just the author of these books, but the illustrator. And I even mentioned this in the foreword, like I am still very, very new at illustration, and you know, it's not like I think that these illustrations are like the best illustrations in the world. I still have leagues to go to get where I would like my art to be one day, but I had a lot of fun making this, and it feels good to get out of my comfort zone as a creative, and it feels amazing to do something that I have wanted to do since I was a little kid, which is not just write stories, but illustrate them as well. So yes, the stories in the Tales of the Sun and the Moon, they are being released as picture books illustrated by me, but they're also being released as a cozy books on tape style, ambient, atmospheric podcast audiobook thing. I'm just gonna call them my books on tape, even though they're not actually on tape, because that's the best way to sum up the vibe. Maybe I'll play a little clip for you here. 'Twas a radiant summer's day, perfect for fishing on the West Coast Sea. Jeremy had rowed his little forest green boat all the way out of the Greenlandian Bay and into the Big Blue. He was alone, and he preferred it that way. Audrey didn't care how he went about his business, so long as he brought her back a catch. Again, this is something that I have been wanting to do for years now. I first got the idea to do a fictional podcast with all the stories set in New Camelot. Gosh, I think it was pre-2020, pre-COVID that I got that idea, but I'm finally acting on it, and it feels really right. Because I've experimented with this throughout the years, but I've never been really happy with the results. And finally, between adding in the atmospheric sounds and between doctoring the vocals so they sound like someone narrating a story on tape, that is what I'm going for. I feel like I finally have created the thing that I've really wanted to create all this time. And it was only a year ago that I decided that I would not just release these short stories as a podcast, but also release them as a picture book as well. These last, oh gosh, 8 or so months, this project has taken a lot from me. I mean, I wrote the story in 2024, but it wasn't until the end of 2025 that I started working on the illustrations. I learned a lot through doing this project, but I'm not gonna get too into that here. I've already rambled on for long enough. Next Sunday's video is gonna be more about the process, more about the behind the scenes of making this. Today's video, I'm gonna do a cozy story time, a cozy read aloud. I did this with the prologue from Aurora and Luna back when I launched Aurora and Luna in the springtime. And we're gonna do it with the Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch as well. But because this is pretty long for a short story, because it's 10,000 words, we're not gonna get through the whole story in this session. We'll just kind of get through the start of it, and if you like it, then please do check out episode 3 of the Tales of the Sun and the Moon, the fictional podcast from the world of New Camelot. It will be linked in the doobly-doo, as will a link to buy a copy of the book if you would like to actually own a physical copy of the book with all of the illustrations. However you want to take in this story, that's entirely up to you. If you want to tune into the free podcast, it is available both on YouTube and on Spotify. I am so happy to have you here. Or if you want to purchase your own physical illustrated copy of The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch, then that delights me just as much. And the links will be in the doobly-doo to that as well. I'm just happy and grateful to have you here hanging out with me, taking in the things that I have created, the things that I have poured my heart and soul into. But what is The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch even about? Well, The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch, it is a retelling of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, but in reverse. So instead of a mermaid wanting to become a human so she can marry a man, a fisherman wants to become a merman so that he can marry a mermaid. I mean, a human wanting to be a mermaid or a merman seems much more real and relatable to me. I don't know about you, but I grew up playing mermaids in the pool. I'll read you the description on the back. A fisherman longs for a mermaid, but not to catch and deliver to the Greenlandian king and queen, as he has countless times before. When Princess Artemis saves Sir Jeremy from drowning in her sister's siren song spell, Jeremy can't help but fall for the mermaid. Jeremy makes a deal with Zilla, a solitary rebel witch who lives off in the Greenlandian forest. The fisherman will receive his own Merfolkian tail so long as he retrieves for Zilla the Merfolkian queen's sacred seashell locket. If, however, Jeremy fails, his body will turn to sand and his soul will belong to the witch. In this dark but whimsical retelling of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, our characters learn that not all wishes are worth fulfilling. Without further ado, let's get into the story. The Tales of the Sun and the Moon. The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch. By Melody Daniel Luna. That's me. Now when you go to More Books and Music by MD Luna, not only is there Aurora and Luna, not only is there my music, Ghost of a Girl, there's also The Tales of the Sun and the Moon, and this book right here. I just want to grow this page. That's my life's ambition, is to just grow this page. Content warning. Includes mentions of sex, domestic violence, and alcoholism. It's not gonna get like super graphic or anything like that, but I felt I should put that in there because despite these whimsical illustrations, this is not a children's book. I don't think I would have felt the need to put this content warning in if it didn't have the whimsical illustrations, but I could totally see someone thinking that I wrote this for kids and then buying it for their niece or nephew or something. And then the parents getting mad and the kid having all kinds of problems, all because of me. So I put the content warning in just to be on the safe side. But it's not gonna be too severe. I guess I'll read you the letter that I wrote to the reader, you, which is about how I feel about the illustrations that I've created and how I feel about me stepping into this role as illustrator. Dear reader, in hitting publish on The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch, I am fulfilling a long-held childhood dream to write, publish, and specifically with this project, illustrate my own book. Now, I will be the first to admit that when it comes to visual art, I am a novice. My pictures, compared to that of the artists I so greatly admire, Beatrix Potter, Cecilia Mary Barker, not sure if I'm saying that right, but it's okay. Oh, I definitely can't say this name. I'm just gonna show you. It's the one that starts with M, to name a few, are really nothing special. You will not find masterful pieces in the pages of this book. I am not there yet, nowhere close. However, I do hope throughout the next decade or two, as I continue to write and illustrate the tales of the sun and the moon, that my drawing will improve. And this non-linear series of short stories set in New Camelot is my invitation to you to join me in that journey. The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch is the first of what I hope will be many installments in the tales of the sun and the moon, all of which will be set in New Camelot, a high fantasy world I have spent these last 11 suns building, and the setting of my character-driven high fantasy epic, The Sun and Moon Saga. Aurora and Luna, the first book in the Sun and Moon Saga, was released just 3 moons ago, and if you enjoy The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch, then I highly encourage you to pick up your copy of Aurora and Luna. Now, without further ado, on with the story. Sincerely, MD Luna. So yeah, I know that I'm not a pro with illustration, but I don't care. I'm getting out of my comfort zone, I'm expressing myself in a way that I've always wanted to, and I'm slowly getting better, and there's a real fulfillment in learning a new skill, learning a new craft, and slowly improving at it. Now we have the dedication. For my father, who showed me early on that becoming a published author was possible, and who told me nautical tales about Princess Desi. And for all of us who grew up longing for our own Merfolkian tale. Yeah, this story, I mean, it's a retelling of The Little Mermaid, so it very much is for those kids who grew up with Disney and who grew up with the Disney Renaissance more specifically, and even more specifically The Little Mermaid. So if I got any of you guys out there, any fellow 90s kids like me, then please let me know in the comments below. Got some maps, the same ones that appear in Aurora and Luna, also hand-drawn by me. There's 3 parts to this book, and part 1 is called The Fisherman. So we start things off with a picture that I drew. Here's our fisherman. His name is Jeremy. 'Twas a radiant summer's day, perfect for fishing on the west coast sea. Jeremy had rowed his little forest green boat all the way out of the Greenlandian Bay and into the big blue. He was alone, and he preferred it that way. Audrey didn't care how he went about his business, so long as he brought her back a catch. And so long as he met her in secret, to satisfy her other appetite as well. Truth be told, Jeremy didn't know if their meetings really were a secret. He suspected that His Majesty King James did know, but didn't care. Or at least didn't care enough to actually do anything about it. Perhaps King James was too busy keeping his unruly daughter in line. Come the full harvest moon, she would be 7 solar cycles of age, and with each trip around the sun, Princess Aurora seemed to grow more and more unhinged. So perhaps King James was too busy dealing with Princess Aurora, or perhaps he was too busy satisfying himself with elven mistresses in the Solar Kingdom. Or perhaps both. Rumor had spread that little Aurora Green wasn't really Audrey's child after all, that she was some half-elven bastard. Jeremy's older brother, Raymond, who lived in the Solar Kingdom, often gossiped about King James, King Reynard, and even Emperor Sola in his booze-infused letters to Jeremy. Regardless, King James was busy, and Audrey was lonely, and she had quite the appetite for Sir Jeremy's fish. There's a lot of characters that are dropped there. Most of them don't play a critical role in this story, but something that happened in the prequels to Aurora and Luna, which I have outlined but I haven't written yet, and I will write when I'm finished the main series. Something that happened, backstory to Aurora and Luna. There were all these adults, witches and warlocks of the old world, and they were all friends, more or less. But there was a schism at some point, and people were divided into two different sides. And Jeremy, the hero of our story, he's this weird exception where he wasn't really in the in crowd with this side, but he's the brother of one of the people who is in the in crowd. And so he was thrown into this world with them, but he doesn't necessarily feel like he belongs there. And so in that way, he's quite a bit like Aurora from Aurora and Luna. And that was something that I intentionally seeded in this book, was just a lot of similarities between Jeremy and Aurora. No, Jeremy was not a mundane fisherman like the others. Being Sir Jeremy, he was a noble mage, and was therefore allowed to use magic to make his catch. Today the sky was a crystal clear blue, not a cloud in it. The salty breeze dancing across the water was refreshing. What a lovely respite from the castle that Jeremy despised so. Again, very similar to Aurora. He could understand why Princess Aurora was always running off into the woods, although he would certainly never breathe those words to Audrey. Jeremy was very grateful that Audrey had recognized his talent as a fisherman, and that she hadn't forced him to become a castle guard or a knight or a quester. Those were the kinds of careers most mages dreamed of, careers in which a noble mage must use their magic for the betterment of the kingdom and the empire. Jeremy, however, had dreamed of spending his days at sea. Again, very similar to Aurora. I'm going to stop pointing this out, but that's going to be a thing. Still, the funny thing about a dream is this: mere moments after said dream comes true, one typically begins dreaming up the next dream. And that very much is the theme of not just this story, but the Little Mermaid fairy tale in general. We're always wanting things, aren't we? And we're always wanting things that are like just out of reach. We always want to be a part of another world. And this tale, both the story I've written and just the fairy tale, The Little Mermaid, they really explore that theme. The Little Mermaid really expresses that truth, that human truth, very beautifully. But more on that in next week's video. Let's get back to the story. Jeremy looked up at the waxing crescent moon that was rising in the west over the sea. It was barely visible in the morning sky. He made a wish. Then he returned to his fishing. About an hour passed. All the while, Jeremy just stared at his float. Not a bite. Yes, Jeremy could use magic to catch fish, but he had never done it that way. He wasn't exactly confident in his magical abilities. The first half of his education had taken place in Old Camelot, back when they had all been studying the craft illegally. They studied magic not so much because they wanted to live life as a warlock or a witch, or so they had been called back on planet Earth, but because if they didn't learn to use their magic, magic would use them. Jeremy hadn't enjoyed his nightly lessons with Professor Schuyler. Still, the alternative was worse. Unlike his older brother Raymond, he had only attended lessons to learn the ways of the craft just well enough to control his magic. Otherwise, it might have accidentally slipped out of him in public, and he would have been put on warlock trial. The second half of his magical education had occurred after the quest for New Camelot, in the New World. Back on planet Earth, it had been perfectly acceptable for a young warlock like Jeremy to feel so dispassionate about his craft. But the entire point of journeying across galaxies and finding this new planet was so that the folk who had once been called witches and warlocks could practice magic liberally. 11 solar cycles had passed since they had settled here on Utopus, and by, Jeremy had become quite the misfit. Everyone, Raymond, Audrey, King James, King Reynard, Emperor Sola, had implored him to focus on magic, the very thing they had traveled such a long way for. Despite their advice, however, Jeremy had put significantly less effort into his craft since coming to the new world. Catching fish the mundane way was better. Even though it took longer, it was relaxing. Simply put, Jeremy loved being out on the water, and his mundane efforts only made it all the more satisfying when he eventually did bring the fruits of his labor to Audrey. Of course, the fish were for all the Greens: King James, Queen Audrey, Princess Aurora, and Prince Jonathan. However, in his heart, they were all for Audrey. Jeremy would do anything for Audrey, for not only was the Greenlandian queen the fairest maiden he had ever laid eyes on, but she was also a passionate lover, and she had allowed him to dedicate his life not to the solar allegiance, but to the sea. Still, Jeremy hadn't fooled himself into thinking that Audrey actually loved him, or at least he knew that they would never be together. She was the queen. Furthermore, she was about 10 suns older than Jeremy, who had only lived through roughly 20 solar cycles himself. It would never become anything real. This Jeremy understood. He had accepted this bitter truth while still allowing himself to enjoy his time with Audrey nonetheless. Where are all the fish? Jeremy wondered as he stared at the waves. Have I overfished these waters by the castle? He rowed north, toward the Greenlandian Isles. It took him a couple of hours to get there. It wasn't as though he had never ventured out this way before, but that he had never needed to, and had always done so out of his desire to explore the sea and all her waters. Jeremy sent out his line again, and he waited. The waves crashed against the sides of the boat, ebbing and flowing. The cries of seagulls soared and echoed in the distance. On a day like today, he really didn't mind waiting. He appreciated how his mundane method forced him to sit on the water and take in this serenity. The Greens, however, did not share this sentiment, and so, for the sake of the Greenlandian queen, he prayed he did catch something. Another hour passed. Jeremy was beginning to wonder if, for the first time in his life, he ought to use a summoning spell to lure the fish in. But then, something happened. Not a tug on his line, but a sound. A voice. No, not one voice. A whole choir of voices. Beautiful voices. Beautiful female voices. So in true melody fashion, literally and figuratively, I wrote a song to go with this story. It's called Siren Song Spell. And here it is, or at least here's part of it. Now, Audrey had warned him about the mermaids who sang so sweetly, drawing men further and further away from the shore and further out to sea, leading them directly into the choppy waters of a storm, all the while laughing at their demise. But despite his many hours spent at sea, Jeremy had never seen any merfolk. Sometimes, however, he had wondered if he had heard them, for he had heard songs like this before, although they had always been distant, as though the choir was singing to some other sailor, and not to him. But now the voices were louder, and it was as though they were singing to him directly, asking him to follow them, inviting him further out to sea. The sea he loved so much, more than Audrey, in fact. Jeremy followed the song. He allowed it to lead him out past Green Island, the largest of the Greenlandian Isles. This was much further than he had ever traveled in his rowboat, although he had been out even further on Ariana. It was was odd how the Greens had named their best ship after Audrey's late mother, a family member that they otherwise never spoke of. Audrey's estrangement from her mother could be accredited to King James's influence, of course. When Jeremy came around the backside of Green Island, no mermaids revealed themselves. Jeremy had been so certain that if he rode through the choppy waters all the way behind the big forested island, a whole choir of sirens would be there waiting for him. That was where it had sounded like the singing had been coming from. But now the voices had ceased, and Jeremy was crashing back down to reality. The most pressing thing was this: he was too far out to be in a rowboat anyway. In these waters you were safe in between the Greenlandian Isles, but once out past them, you were at the mercy of the sea herself. It was only now dawning on Jeremy that this had been the intention of the singers. It must have been a siren song, just as Audrey had warned him. Of course, in his mind, he had suspected this from the beginning, but he had been under their siren song spell and had been acting from his heart. Only now that the spell was lifted was he able to think clearly again. The entire journey back to the Greenlands, Jeremy felt a fool. Well, my camera is about to die, so I think this is where we're gonna leave off for today. Before we do, here's a picture of Queen Audrey Green, Jeremy's lover and Aurora's mother. But yeah, if you would like to hear the whole story, then please do check out the latest episode of the podcast, The Tales of the Sun and the Moon. There is a lot more ukulele playing in the podcast, and there's sound effects, there's ocean waves, there's seagulls, there's wind, there's cauldrons bubbling, there's nighttime forest sounds, there's a kitty meowing, there's so many sound effects. Yeah, if you listen to the official podcast, there is a lot of ambiance and just good vibes, and there's details that I put in it that, yeah, I hope you enjoy and I hope you appreciate. And of course, if you would like to order your own copy of The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch, your physical illustrated edition, the link will be down in the pinned comments. In next week's video, I'm going to talk about the behind the scenes of making this, and I'm going to share with you all of the different illustrations and talk about the process of illustrating my first picture book. This was a huge thing to do, and I'm just so happy that I finally fulfilled this childhood dream. It feels really good. Even though my art is not where I want it to be, it feels really good to have taken the necessary step I need to get it where I want it to be. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then please give it a big thumbs up for me, and please subscribe to the channel. Next week's video is going to be another cozy Sunday chit-chat style vlog, so definitely make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. All the links to all my books and my music are in the doobly-doo as always. Thank you very much for your support. This was my second book release of the year, and I still have one more book release to go before the end of 2026. So I will see you there. Until next time, go and listen to The Fisherman, the Mermaid, and the Witch, and stay cozy.